Hello, everyone, and welcome. My name is Becca Choate, and I serve as Associate for Global Advocacy and Education with Global Ministries of the Christian Church Disciples of Christ and the United Church of Christ. Welcome to Wednesdays with the World, a United Church of Christ webinar series. This series highlights the ways in which the quest for justice is intersectional and global, providing opportunities for increased awareness of global concerns and highlighting opportunities for advocacy and action. Today's webinar is called Reflections on Mission in the Time of COVID. We're going to hear from 4 mission coworkers serving around the world as they reflect about their call, serving during this pandemic, and what mission means to them as they live and work with global partners. I'd now like to introduce Cathy Nichols, Executive for Mission Personnel with Global Ministries. Welcome, Cathy.
Thanks, Becca, and thank you everyone for joining us today. I am so excited to have this conversation today with all of you and with the 4 mission coworkers that we have sharing. And so I've asked them all to introduce themselves so you get a sense of who we're hearing from. And we're going to go in alphabetical order. So we will start with Nishan and Maria Bakalian, and then we will follow with Kahala Cannon, and then Andrew Larson. So Nishan and Maria, can you introduce yourselves and share about who you're serving with?
My name is Nishan Bakalian. I'm a native of Philadelphia. Right now, I'm in Philadelphia because I'm on home assignment. But generally, we're living in Lebanon, Beirut, Lebanon, and we've been there for the past 4.5 years. I'd like to say a little bit about the partner organization with whom I'm serving mostly. It's called the Union of the Armenian Evangelical Churches in the Near East, and it covers churches and schools and social organizations, social institutions, social care institutions, and this sort of thing in 7 different countries in the Middle East. And it was founded in the 1920s following the Armenian genocide. The union, it's interesting that it came about with a very strong connection to missionaries from the United States, especially from the predecessor board to the wider church ministries or global ministries, called the American Board of Commissioners for Foreign Missions. And so there's been a long time connection, 175 years this year, even more than 175 years this year, as we celebrated our movement's anniversary. So that's the partner. I'm working as special ministerial staff, helping in whatever ways I can, but mostly helping with communications, with mentoring new leadership, with being a resource person for especially in the areas of music and worship, and whatever many other ways we have to help out each other.
My name is Maria Bakalian, and I was born and raised in Beirut, Lebanon. Nishan and I have been in Beirut, Lebanon, serving for the past 4.5 years as mission co-workers for Global Ministries. And my work has been with Haigazian University, which is really the only Armenian university in the diaspora. Haigazian University is owned by the Union of Armenian Evangelical Churches of the Near East, as well as the American Missionary Association of America. To tell you just a couple of facts about the university, it's a small American-style English language liberal arts institution, which was founded in 1955. And it was founded to carry on the higher educational mission of the Armenian Evangelical Church, destroyed in the Armenian genocide in Turkey. It provides relatively low cost but high quality education for a rather diverse student population who really would not otherwise be able to afford it. It's generous. It has a generous financial aid program, and it is also partly supported by the United Church of Christ. My work is within the alumni office, the development and alumni office of the university.
Hello, my name is Kahala Cannon, and I'm a native of Tennessee. I currently serve in the Kingdom of eSwatini, which is a small country in Southern Africa. And my partners that I work with there are the Council of Swaziland Churches. The Council of Swaziland Churches is one of the mother body churches in eSwatini. And the motto of the church is John 10:10, that they may have life and have it more abundantly. So the council is comprised of some dynamic leaders who work constantly to be very proactive and actionable in their approach and on the forefront of addressing many issues such as peace and justice, human rights, women's rights, and women's economic empowerment, and many times being a liaison between government and the people. So there I work in 3 focal areas of ministry, with one being with the women's wing of the Council of Churches, the other serving in the departments of the JPR, Justice, Peace, and Reconciliation, and lastly, being a part of the Faith and Community Initiative that has worked tirelessly to bring epidemic control of HIV and AIDS in the country.
My name is Andrew Larson. I work as a program assistant in the areas of justice, peace, and human rights with our partner in the Philippines, the United Church of Christ in the Philippines, or the UCCP. I specifically focus on issues around human rights violations, widespread violence of extrajudicial killings, documentation and reporting, and especially supporting imprisoned activists and their families in their pursuit of justice. More broadly about the UCCP, the United Church of Christ in the Philippines, they're a long-term partner of Global Ministries. Their prophetic work, which is really how they sort of view their role in the community as being truth tellers and prophets, is focused on resisting the oppressive authoritarian regimes and fighting for human rights. Their work for justice and peace then, within the current context of the Philippines, puts a target on their back, but they remain committed to creating an equitable society for all of their fellow siblings in Christ. Empowering and educating their communities is also another great import of the UCCP. They place great emphasis on schools and theological education.
So as you can see, we have 4 different mission co-workers with 4 different things that they do, which actually is pretty emblematic of all of our mission co-workers around the world. Everybody does something different. But what unites us is a call to serve in mission. So I want to ask each of you, why did you choose to serve? What made you feel the call? And I'm going to go ahead and do the same order this time, and then we'll shake it up after that. So Nishan, we'll go ahead and start with you.
For me, the choice to go out of the American context and serve has grown with my growing awareness of the resources that I have, whether they be as a pastor or as a musician or as, well, in particular, in this case, because the partner is an Armenian people group, my growing awareness of Armenian issues, concerns, struggles, and of course the very important tool of mastering the Armenian language. Although growing up in the US, I never spoke Armenian, but I learned it as an adult. So these resources kind of help me to focus on serving overseas. We have served overseas before in Beirut, but in this particular time, and for these particular needs, seeing the needs there in the Middle East, and especially the needs for experienced leadership. As with so many countries in the world, many of the countries in the Near East or the Middle East have experienced an exodus of their best and brightest people. And this has impacted the church and its ability to minister not just to the Armenian community, which is a minority community in every country in the Middle East, but through the Armenian community there to be able to reach out and make a difference in society in general. People who have grown up there, who know Armenian and Arabic or Farsi or whatever the language is, Turkish, etc., Greek, to empower the church to really be able to do its job. And this is something that very much spoke to me when I saw who I am and what I have to offer, and to be able to offer it in a place of great need. Not that there are no needs in North America, not that there are no difficulties and struggles in North America, but my equipping seemed to me, through God's guidance, to match the needs that are there. That's kind of in a capsule, encapsulated my thoughts.
The reason why I chose to serve is perhaps slightly different in that I have always served alongside Nishan throughout our married life. And it was more a way of just changing the location of the service. Of course, with the change in the location of the service, it also changed the face, the flavor, the different aspects of service were perhaps more challenging. And yet knowing that this is what God had called me for also has definitely made it easier and more doable to go together and serve together. We are involved in different areas of service, but it really it boils down to being present with those who are there, supporting those who are working there or living there, and being the extended hands of God to a people who need all the support that they can have.
For me, my journey to service began at my church. My church started a very active global missions ministry. And with our ministry, we had gone on several of the global ministries, people-to-people pilgrimages. So while we were there, and then while I would participate as well, we would begin to meet our partners, the partners that we visited, see the work that they're doing, also the mission co-workers that were there, and to just see how God was moving and the work that God was doing in other places in the world. And as I began to go on more and more people-to-people pilgrimages, I began to discern God calling me to serve as well. So I began serving because God called me to serve. I gave God my yes, and I just stepped out on faith with the blessings of my family, my friends, and my church. And I just left everything to join God and what he was doing and in the place that he had ordained for me to go. And the rest has been history. And I have served in several places, and it's been a joy. It's been a blessing.
I think the church has always been sort of a global body to me growing up. It always felt like the call to see our connections across boundaries and community lines. And then as my thoughts on sort of what is the justice that we're called to do and the work and the action drives that even more to be in accompaniment with those communities around the world. So, you know, I work in areas of human rights, but I really think human rights being, you know, if my sanctity and well-being is tied up inherently with the sanctity and well-being of my siblings. So that calls us then to action, it calls us to be in community, both local and afar. So I think that's part of my call to service. If we are truly to be part of this movement of wholeness in our all too fragmented world, then being called into accompaniment being called to creating relationships and learning with our global partners is a way that I feel exceptionally connected to as part of my vocational journey, as part of the way I feel Christ and God's presence, having also done Peace Corps before this, having those global connections as the way we engage the world.
Thank you. These are all beautiful reasons why people serve. And I just want to put a little plug out there. If you are watching this and you're thinking, wow, this sounds like something that I might want to do, please be in touch. Becca will put the information in because we are continuing to serve even through these times of COVID. And that is something that many people have been writing Global Ministries and calling Global Ministries just about once a week. We get a call. Are there still mission coworkers serving during COVID? How has COVID impacted their service? So I want to take this opportunity to ask each of you, and maybe we'll go in reverse order this time. So we'll start with Andrew. How has COVID impacted your service in the Philippines?
Yeah, I think in many ways, obviously, we can talk about sort of the lockdowns or, types of quarantine measures. But I think really what I focus on is how COVID has changed the service. It's actually amplified and shifted the work that's already been being done. I think, especially as all churches have kind of grappled for what does it mean to continue to be in ministry through this, I feel there's often a sense of mourning and loss as we have to sort of shift and change things are done. But within the Philippine context, especially within human rights, there's a lot of concerning actions that have happened because of COVID. Authoritarian regimes sort of exploiting the current situation, using the guise of the pandemic and pandemic regulations to sort of expand their own power, using lockdowns and community controls that are sort of seen as quote unquote health measures are actually ways to expand state violence and expand state power. So that's the way I see it, is it's COVID has actually amplified the work that was already being done and has raised new concerns, but it's concerns of the already challenging of human rights situation. So I think a part of that is also that we see solutions that maybe work here in the United States and things that work in other places that don't just make a clean application to other contexts. So if you want to talk about like shifting to Zoom or shifting to virtual things, but you don't have the same sort of infrastructure and internet capabilities, it took more creative and patient responses to sort of continue to do some of those things. That you can't just socially distance and we hope we all get on a Zoom call when most of your pastors and rural congregations don't have that same capability. So I think that's another part of how COVID has changed services, being willing to be creative, willing to be bold with ideas that may not work in other contexts, but worked within the Philippines. And I think as the pandemic continues to rage on, that's something that we still struggle with, but also are called to as being those creative, new, and imaginative ways of resisting the status quo, fighting against the authoritarian regime of the current administration in the Philippines, who is taking advantage of the pandemic to expand their power and exploit the situation.
With me, COVID has changed my service regarding, I would say, amplifying those things that were currently present, but also the change in my location. I currently am home serving from Tennessee on home assignment. But even though I'm home, I still remain connected with my colleagues in eSwatini. We're on regular communication with each other, and we still work together, helping each other with different assignments and things of that nature. What I will say is COVID did heighten the awareness and also brought out some other things that the people gave voice to. During the second wave of COVID, after that, the country experienced some climatic changes. There was a lot of devastation from tropical cyclone Eloise. So with the coronavirus and the tropical storm, the devastation that occurred from that, a lot of things happened. People began to be very frustrated over the economic situation of the country. Also came limited access to resources such as medications, also limited resources to the COVID-19 vaccines, and then also authoritative leadership in the country. Some things happened where the people just felt like their voices were not heard. And then the straw that broke the camel's back is more recently the government's decision to stop communities from delivering their petitions to elected members of parliament. So all of those things, and then that was the breaking point, and then people began to protest. So then there started to be a lot of civil unrest within the country. So those are also some things that are occurring in the country right now. And everyone in the country solicits your prayers as they work through COVID and the political and civil unrest in the country.
Well, COVID certainly doesn't mean that the needs changed in the country. And as far as my work was concerned, rather than work from the university, I was working mostly from home. The type of work that I do did permit that with some visits to the university. But during COVID, really the needs amplified, especially since the country has been going through such dire, difficult situations economically, leadership, corrupt leadership. And one of the positives during the time of lockdown was that the health ministry was being very diligent in obtaining vaccines for everyone, not, of course, not for the young, but for everyone, and instituting systems by which people could register and receive the vaccines. And those who, of course, all of this depended on whether you had a telephone or you had internet access. But for the areas where they were aware of people not having internet access, they would have a mobile clinic, whereby it was announced a couple of days or ahead of time so that people could simply go and be vaccinated. This was definitely a positive thing, one positive thing that we saw in Lebanon during the past 2 years. I must say that at the university, many changes had to take place after the August 4th explosion. That was already a huge blow to the system. But once everything was fixed, but then, of course, the pandemic started, and the whole system of teaching had to go from in school, on campus, classroom teaching. They had to switch to online teaching. This took a lot of doing on the part of the tech department and the faculty, etc. But it's wonderful to see that none of the teaching stopped. They continued, and as a matter of fact, they are in the first semester of the 2021-22 academic year. And one exciting thing to see is that with difficulties in Lebanon, especially the young people will go out and help in whatever way they can, whether it is by distributing food or helping to clean up or helping to rebuild. There are many positives that do come out of these difficult situations. I think
just to continue the same thoughts, because we're talking about Lebanon and its situation and its difficulties. It was already in a very difficult situation, as it has been. It never fully emerged from the ravages of the Civil War from 1975 to 1990. And even though more than 30 years have passed since the end of the Civil War, it has remained a very broken country, and which of course is almost a call to action for the church. And so in this brokenness, the further deterioration that had been occurring over the past years was just aggravated by the emergence of the pandemic. There were already protests happening throughout the country for the past 2 years against the, well, in general, the corruption in the government levels, in the banking sector, the struggles that people have, the dropping out of the middle class into the poverty. It's estimated that close to 75% of the population in Lebanon is food insecure. So this is a huge thing for our partners and for really everyone of every faith, Christian or Muslim, to address this somehow. And so what I found myself doing was realizing anew the importance of supporting the partner organization, not to actually go out and do stuff, but to help them to do their work. And so we were kicked indoors, as everybody was, with these lockdowns, week-long, 2 weeks long, 1 month long, longer than a month, where only a few hours a day you were allowed to go out just to get essential goods from a nearby with a permit. But to help the church do its spiritual ministry, help the schools or university to do their educational ministry, just in so many ways to do this. And one of the things that I found myself doing was, since people couldn't gather for any kind of worship service, any kind of Bible study, to help facilitate the online activities of the church. So it put into focus some things that maybe weren't so much in focus before, and made us aware. And as Maria mentioned, the last summer's explosion, August 4th, in the Beirut port, devastating a third of the city, really was an opportunity for people of all faiths and no faith to roll up their sleeves and to get out on the street, because the government was not doing that and was not going to be doing that, to just put their efforts together to help clean up and get people to just have some semblance of, I won't say normalcy, I'll say humanity, because they were deprived of their humanity with all that was going on, and they continue to do so. And as Kahala said, I think this is the case in all of these countries. The church covets the wider church's prayers in all of this, because only through prayer can they find the strength to get through each day.
So it's really interesting to hear from all four of you how COVID was one situation in the midst of many other situations that are going on, and in fact probably aggravated or just accelerated what was already happening. And it makes the time that you're serving there all the more critical. So I want to ask you, we are looking at a time where the church here in the United States is getting a little smaller and budgets are a little tighter. And maybe people are asking, why are we still sending mission co-workers? Why is mission still important? And I'm going to go this round one more time, and then we'll flip it again. So Andrew, we'll start with you. Why do you think mission is important in the world today?
Yeah, I think as you're mentioning, COVID exacerbated or even sort of brought to the surface issues that were already there. And I think the same is true also within the United States. We saw our safety nets sort of fall apart, and we saw these things that have been plaguing communities for a long time, that the pandemic has really amplified those situations. So I think our work isn't done. The path before us is still set. There's still a lot of grieving and processing and unpacking to do with this pandemic as we're still living through it. But I also don't think that we should let sort of the relief of a sense of normalcy or a relief of sort of like, oh, phew, we got through it, drive us into complacency. I think this is the time where wild imagination and beautiful displays of new mission and ministry can be a chance to sort of take this time that we've used to pause and reflect and, stay close to our loved ones during this pandemic and move forward with, pursuit of justice and peace through that.
In missions, the sharing and telling of stories is very important. So for me, I feel like this is one of the main reasons why missions is important in 2021. With the ongoing pandemic, the natural disasters that I talked about, economic hardships, you bring awareness to the true depths of what's going on in the countries that you serve in. And a lot of these issues and what's going on in our countries are not, we don't see these issues portrayed or, on the news in our countries. So I think it's very important to enlighten everyone about what's going on in our country. And in eSwatini, during the recent civil unrest, the faith-based community, including my partner that I work with, the Council of Swaziland Churches, they did solicit prayers. They asked the international community, international partners to engage not only other faith-based communities, but they also reached out and asked for us to engage our government officials, that our government officials may reach out to the king and solicit for him to have the ability and the willingness to sit down and listen to what the people have to say and what the will of the people is, to come to a table for authentic dialogue so that some type of solution or maybe an avenue where they can move towards change that the people in eSwatini are searching for or want. So I feel like that's one of the main reasons why missions is still important today.
I think mission is important. It has always been important. And I believe it's even more so in 2021 and going on from this time. The more helping hands a community, suffering community has with following principles that are based on faith and of service, the better it is for them. And the need is even, as I said, it's even greater. And when the community has been suffering through so much, having a new face, a new person coming with commitment is definitely a morale booster and a big help. And I really think that the need will grow even more.
The tendency of the church, I think, is to go towards being insular. This is, maybe it's just it's a factor of when you create a community of love, a community of concern, that you tend to just gravitate towards each other because it's something as humans, we need that to feel that sense of comfort and security and to encourage one another. And I think for that reason, for that very good reason that churches tend towards being insular, mission is needed in order to add to that urgency of fellowship and support that we need, to seeing others' needs and others' concerns and others' struggles. I realized that the world has kind of been traumatized by COVID. And people tend to think of, well, oh, do I have a mask on? Have I been vaccinated? Has the other person been vaccinated? Where can I go? Where shouldn't I go? Can I dine indoors? Can I dine outdoors? I mean, all of these things, it's about us. It's about where we are, how we're doing. Will we survive? Will we get through this? And so the world is turning more insular in that sense. But to have a benevolent, I mean this in the best sense, to have a concern for the other. I think when we build mission into what we're doing as a church, we are beginning to see that, there are people in that faraway place that have the same worries that we have and the same need for fellowship. And we can bridge this. And it's something that, of course, technology is also helping us to do. But there's no substitute for being there in person. I mean, we're here on home assignment, and yet we want to be connected back to the community where we serve. And it's something that really, sometimes it gets to us, that we're here, we have 24-hour electricity. We don't have to worry, will there be medicine in the pharmacy? We don't have to worry about, oh, gee, the food prices have gone up yet another day. But our income hasn't gone up. We don't have any of these worries that our partners there have on a continual basis. So I think breaking us out of the mold of insularity is really one of the key things why we need mission in 2021. And it also follows the outlook of Jesus Christ himself, who took his small group and said, go, even if it's 2 of you, go.
Thank you, Nishan. That's a great note to end on, the Great Commandment, which is definitely one of the reasons that we still continue to do mission today. But it has become more challenging. It's become easier in some ways. You have the great connections, as you've all mentioned, of the internet and Zoom and all the rest, but it also, COVID and isolation and being on lockdown in a country far away and away from friends and family has been that much more difficult. And so I'd like you to each share with us, if you could, a moment of scripture or a passage of scripture that has helped you in these challenging times. And we're going to go back to our original order. So Nishan, we'll start with you.
There are so many scriptures that have spoken in new ways through this time, but in particular in the Lebanese context, where so much is breaking down and has broken down, the Beatitudes, as Luke presents them, the words of Jesus, the words of blessing, have really spoken to me, because we see the poor and the hungry and the sorrowing and the rejected and hated all around us, and the callousness of those who are responsible for these people, seeing that none of this escapes God's glance, none of this is unseen, remains unseen. It reminds me of that God is giving us the choice of doing what is right, following him, believing, caring for others. He's given us that choice. But to see that the righteous are not forgotten, those who do righteousness, and those also who try but cannot because they lack the resources. So Luke's presentation of this is something that's really spoken to me, and especially since he doesn't just call blessed those who are struggling in this way, he also pronounces woes. He also pronounces a judgment on those who persist in just accumulating, amassing their wealth, thinking about their comfort, to know that, yes, they will have to answer to God unless they turn away from what they are doing and care for those around them. This is it's been a great encouragement to me.
This is a verse that that has been speaking to my heart especially for the past year or so. And I want you to look at the words at the very end. I will uphold you with my righteous right hand. Throughout the pandemic season, the idea of social distancing, not touching people, not touching things. If you touch something, you have to sterilize. But I am grateful to God that I can hold on to his right hand. And throughout my nursing years also, I was a great believer in touching the patient, that touch, that warmth, and seeing pictures. I'm sure you've seen, you may have seen this in intensive care units. Some nurses are filling disposable gloves with warm water and tying it on top and underneath the patient's hand so that they feel warmth. The warmth of the touch that they miss so much because they're in isolation. So it's not so much about the fear, but knowing that God is with me. And even in one of the other translations, versions of this same verse, it says, I will keep a firm grip on you. So I know he's got a firm grip on me, so do not be afraid.
I have numerous scriptures that speak to me, but in times of challenges, I have 4 that are just really pressing on my heart and that I meditate on. And they are Romans 11 and 29, for God's gifts and his call are irrevocable. Next is 1 Thessalonians 5 and 24. The one who calls you is faithful and he will do it. The third one is Isaiah 49 and 23, the last part of it. It says, then you will know that I am the Lord. Those who hope in me will not be disappointed. And the last one is Numbers 23 and 19. God is not a man that he should lie, nor the son of man that he shall repent. Has he said it and will he not do it? Or has he spoken and will he not make it good? So in life, we do have times of great joy and celebration, but we also have times where we have those valley experiences where we are challenged because we are hurting or other people are hurting. We experience disappointments. We experience expectations that were not met, or maybe we had expectations that were not realistic, or things that happen in life unexpectedly that could cause us just great hurt and pain. But in those times, I just thank God that God is God. He is the great I am. He is Almighty God. He is the Lord God. And that my strength and my power does not rest on me, but his power is made perfect in my weakness. And that it is God who I trust, who I rely on. And he is the one who walks with me. And at times he carries me through those trials and tribulations. And to know that sometimes, even in our best, sometimes things may not go the way we expected or the way we planned. But even in that, to know that when God calls us to do something, he anoints us to do it, and that his gifts and his call are irrevocable. And that is just a joy to my heart to know. And that when God says something, his great promises will come to pass. Just hold on and walk in faith, and we will see the manifestations of his great promises if we faint not.
I looked at this one, especially as over this past couple years of the pandemic, about clothing yourselves. I feel like, we've talked about like wearing masks. In the Philippines, it's also a lot to wear those face shields wherever you go. So it's really, you got this like big visor, and so it seems like we're like wrapping ourselves in these protective gear. But what if we also wrapped ourselves in a different kind of armor? So clothing yourself with compassion, kindness, humility, gentleness, and patience. Kind of speaking to what Nishan's talking about, being less insular and having an armor of compassion and a protection of kindness towards the world around us. How does that help us continue to navigate these difficult situations where we don't know how to make those same social connections, where we don't know how to make that same community, but being together, cloaked into these values, and wearing them on our hearts and for those to see around us. Also, this verse is particularly used in one of my favorite camp songs. So it's a great sort of my connection to outdoor ministry, which has always had a strong presence in my heart. So both the message of the verse, but also I can always get that song stuck in my head as soon as I start reading this as well. So it really it's a good one to tug at my heart as I'm going through the day.
Thanks, Andrew. Well, I think that these are all such helpful thoughts as we go forward, both in our own personal times of struggle during COVID, but also as we pray for all of you who are serving. And I would just ask one last question, then we'll open it up to questions from the folks who are watching. And my last question is, if you had one piece of advice to give to someone who was thinking about serving as a mission coworker, what would that piece of advice be? And we'll go ahead and stick in the same order. So Nishan, you want to start?
I think that if I were to talk to somebody who was mulling over the possibility of going outside the United States to serve among a partner anywhere in the world, I would say, make sure that what you're hearing is not your own voice, but the voice of God. That you're not trying to go away from something, but go towards something. I would also say, take stock of your resources, see what you have, and then see what the place you envision serving, what their needs are. And if your resources meet those needs, maybe this is the voice of God nudging you, and take the step, like Kahala said, that maybe a short-term service would be in order, maybe a little longer than that. But really, the thing that, this goes back to the whole idea of why we need mission in 2021, is the idea of resource sharing. Because the church out there, I say, because I'm in the US, the church in the world has so much to offer the church in North America. We always see, well, they don't have material resources, but there are so many other resources that they have that I know that Maria and I both have felt so enriched by our service, that this is really, it's a great opportunity to enrich and also to be enriched.
Couple of things I would say to the person. Number one is to make sure that it is God's will and not your will, and to be sure that you know what direction you will take once you get there. Go with a plan and learn as much as you can about the place where you're going. And by the way, I will say, life will not be the same once you go and serve.
I definitely agree with Nishan and Maria. Definitely spend time in prayer. I usually encourage people spend time in prayer and listening for God's voice. And when God speaks, to obey his voice, whatever that is for you, because everybody's journey is going to be different. So just discerning God's calling for yourself. Like you said, it could be for someone it's short term, for someone else it could be long term, for someone it could be domestic, somewhere here in the States. Others is overseas, but whatever your calling is for yourself, be obedient and authentic to that. And also be open to difference, because during your calling, it could be something very different than what you're actually used to or what your life has been in the past. Like for me, I've done so many different things during my mission journey than what I was doing here at home prior to going. So I think just being open and allowing yourself to just grow in so many different ways, and you will just see the many different ways in which you will encounter God during your experience and your journey with Him.
I think the first three covered beautifully about what you should listen to the call. So I think I'll take a slightly different route too, of sort of just like there are great and wonderful ways of connecting with your local church, with the global church as well, even if it's not being called personally to mission. Our partners love to connect with conferences and regions and local congregations, your mission coworkers. And there's so many connections between our local and global experience. For like example, in the Philippines, the US is one of the main military aid providers to the country of the Philippines, and advocacy and work can be done here within our own country and our own communities to shape how we interact with our global partners. So that'd be my last sort of spiel. If that call and that listening to God isn't necessarily taking you to a place maybe outside of your country, but also that there's so many wonderful ways to connect. And I know the UCCP loves to have that global network, and I'm sure all the others can agree that they're partners of having those prayers and those support and conversation to learn and grow as a global community is very important and vital as well.
I think all of these types of support, I have folks that call and say, I am a prayer warrior for Global Ministries. Every day I go on your website, I find a mission coworker, and I pray for that mission coworker. And that is equally important as it is to go and travel and be a part in service somewhere. So we thank all of you for all of those things that you do. We want to open it to questions. I think some of the questions have been answered as people chat, but I did see from Melva a question about your safety. And I know that this is always a concern, both in the Philippines and in Lebanon and in eSwatini with civil unrest. And can you all just share a little bit about how you feel, and particularly the advice that you get from the partner that you're serving with regards to safety? And we'll start with you, Andrew.
Yeah, thank you. Melva, it's good to see that you're here today. I think with the Philippines about trusting our partner is that it's a mutual relationship. So being safe is about the partner wants to build that trust and build that community with you. So our partners keep our safety in mind as well, and so they wouldn't have us in situations that would put us into those places. Not that they can control the circumstances, but they will do their best to also keep our own safety in mind. In my particular circumstance where I live in the Philippines within the West Visayas, there is a privileging of my identity, where in other parts of the country that might be a target for being a foreign missionary. But where I live, there is a certain sort of protection with my status as an American holding passport holder and as a white man that prevents some of the more direct attacks of violence that usually are experienced for those who might be fighting for human rights. But as I mentioned, there's some of those other lockdowns and sort of extreme authoritarian measures that sort of affect the community and my coworkers within the partner as well, about seeing how they are harassed by the police and the government. That's something that we have to deal with and kind of handle together as a group. So.
Yes, I definitely agree with Andrew. I've served in several countries, India, South Korea, and now in eSwatini. And in each service that I've done, the partners have been very vigilant and very intentional about looking after me and ensuring my safety, my overall well-being, whether it's physical, mental, emotional. So that is one thing that is very good. We have a great relationship with our partners, and our partners have a great relationship with us. And there's a mutual respect and love and general well-being that we have for each other.
Our situation is a little bit different because Maria is born and raised in Beirut. I look like I belong in that society. So I'm not immediately picked out as a foreigner. It gets me in trouble sometimes, but we'll put that aside. Echoing what has already been said, our partners are aware of all of this, and they don't push us into situations where we might be facing any danger. We also take care not to put ourselves in demonstrations or road closures or tire burnings or any of that sort of thing. Oh, I've got to get this picture because I want to send it. We try to restrain ourselves. But the flip side of that is that our partners really look to us to be with them and to be present with them, and not to withdraw because it's not safe. So there's a certain element of risk that I think has to be there, since we are serving alongside them, and that we not insulate ourselves in our apartment.
I'm going to go ahead and say, unfortunately, that we're getting to the end of our time, but I do want to say a big thank you to Nishan, Maria, Andrew, and Kahala for your sharing with us. I know that there are a lot of folks that still have questions, including when are we coming back to in-person itineration? And Kay, we are starting carefully, gradually, with vaccinated people to vaccinated congregations. We do have a large number of mission co-workers that are also available for online interpretation. If you would like to have a visit, you can also be in touch with our office. And finally, we want to say thank you to Becca for asking mission co-workers to come and share with all of you on this Wednesdays with the world. Thanks, Becca.
Thank you, Cathy, for leading us through this conversation with our mission coworkers, and thank you to our mission coworkers for joining us, and to all of you who are watching. We want to thank you all for supporting this webinar series. I do want to mention we have one upcoming webinar within the Wednesdays for the World series. It's going to be about World Communion Sunday. We're going to have a worship service all together virtually, focusing on communion and how folks celebrate communion in other parts of the world. So we encourage you to join us. That's going to be Wednesday, September 29th, 2 to 3 o'clock Eastern Time. And I've got the link to register for that. I've just put that in the chat, and we look forward to having you join us. So once again, thank you all for joining us, and please make sure to visit our website, globalministries.org. You can find the profiles for these 4 mission coworkers and all of our mission coworkers, and ways to contact the mission personnel office, Cathy's office, and join our mailing list and keep in touch with Global Ministries. So thank you all for joining us today.